What was the strangest rule your parents had for you growing up as a child? Mum's parents didn't let their children laugh while lying down. Whenever someone made a joke, if anyone was lying down, they had to sit up and laugh. No Harry Potter, because of all the wizards. Now, I could understand the rule except for one thing. I was allowed to play D&D, read Lotter, have friends who were literally occultists, but no Harry Potter. A sock tax. In retrospect, smart. I hated it at the time, so I left my dirty socks around the house. I don't know why I would be taking socks off all over the place. I was a dang kid. I guess I was sloppy and it just happened and the socks had to be off right then and there. Parents got fed up with this, and so, to get my dirty socks back, I had to pay $0.25 per sock. Doesn't seem like a big deal at first, but it adds up when you're 9 years old. Had to literally nickel and dime my way through a few pairs because I was running out of dang socks. I was kind of a sock deserting addict, I guess. Finally got in the habit of picking up my socks for a while and things seemed fine and then hit a heavy relapse. Parents gave me a big butt box of my dirty socks for Christmas that year and a few pairs of new ones. Got better after that. Typing this is making me smile. I really love my mom and dad. We tried this with our kid. He just went without socks. I wasn't allowed anything remotely entertaining, TV, mobile or toys in my bedroom until I was 16. And that only changed because I bought my own entertainment and convinced my mum that because I bought it and was old enough it shouldn't be a rule anymore. All I had in my bedroom were books and my bed. Really bland room. Story. When I was a young child my toys were in the spare room next to my room, my own playroom. I soon outgrew toys and spent most of the sunlight out with friends. When I was 15, the Xbox 360 was released and they got one from their parents and rather play Xbox than come outside. It got lonely quick. I didn't, and even if I did I wouldn't be able to use it much because my dad would always watch TV, and I wasn't allowed my own TV. So I got a job as a pizza delivery boy, saved the money and bought my own Xbox 360 and TV. I was adamant that I was old enough to have own TV and whatever in my room, even girls. Bought the Xbox 360 and TV, took them home, set them up in my room and started playing. Around 2 hours later, Mum comes in to tell me dinner is ready, then she spots my TV and goes apeshit. So I stood up and I told her, I worked my butt off to buy this stuff. I earned the money doing a job and that if I'm old enough to work, I am old enough to have a TV or whatever in my room. She walked off, probably to tell my dad, then 1 hour later came back with my dinner on a tray and said I was right. I have grown up and that she was proud of me for getting a job and earning money for myself. I can have whatever in my room. Just don't stay up all night playing games. Be glad for your mom. So many other people would be telling this story with the TV and game getting smashed. My mom wouldn't let me touch my brother. A side hug was okay for pictures and making up after a fight, but no cuddly stuff. And her definition of cuddly was him leaning on me on the couch when he's sick. He's 5 years younger than me and we rarely got along, so anything like that was rare. It kind of messed with me when I was younger. She made me feel like I was being a pervert, but I still had no idea what I was doing. Once on a car trip, I was super sick with whooping cough. I was sprawled across the backseat and my head was touching my brother's leg. She flipped out. Number. That's not right. Not okay. Get on your side. He was 10. I was 15. WTF, mom? I think your mom might have been physically shamed. Not being allowed to cut our hair. It was down nearly to our knees. It was not religious or cultural. Just IDK. Then my mom let my younger sisters cut theirs, but I still wasn't allowed. When I turned 18 and finally could, the hairstylist said I had over a foot of split ends she took off. I wasn't allowed to go to a friend's house unless my parents talked to their parents and made sure we'd be supervised the entire time. This was a rule up until I moved out at 18. People thought it was weird, so I didn't have any friends and I literally ate my lunches alone in a bathroom stall. Thanks mom and dad. Not my parent, but my friend's father had a ton of rules about not doing dangerous stuff. That's not all that unusual, but I always liked the way he justified them. He always said that he once died doing XY. Not almost died. No, he in all seriousness told us he once died. Well, Many times actually, because there were a lot of rules. Example. Don't swim under the steps that led into the swimming pool when diving. I once died doing that. This is great. Now I just need kids to say it too. You don't get something if you ask for it. This is something my mum would say to me when I asked for something while we were shopping. It didn't make sense when I was 6. Doesn't make any more sense when I'm 17. Maybe it will in a few years. It's to stop kids from bugging her for stuff. Can't costs a quarter. We weren't allowed to give up on something and say I can't. And we'd have to put a quarter in this Snoopy bank if we did. She wanted to encourage us to look for solutions and ask for help instead of just giving up. In the long run, I think it helped because I went to school for electrical engineering and am now a web developer where I essentially do problem solving all day long. This is a great idea. My parents never let me look at people kissing on TV when I was a kid. Not sure what they were trying to teach me, but I guess I should thank them for my adult awkwardness in PDA situations including my own. Yeah, my parents were the same. And even to this day, if they're in the room and I'm watching a movie or they are watching a movie, I automatically close my eyes or look away without realizing. They don't care anymore because I'm nearly 22, but I still feel awkward about it with them around. My parents never took me out to dinner ever. Not exaggerating at all. In my 18 years living with them, we did not eat out even once. The habit was to have 3 meals at home. Even when I was older, in high school, and deliberately went out with friends, they still compelled me to eat 3 meals every day at home. When I got home there was my share on the table and I had to finish all of it no matter what. That meant I had to hold back when I went out with friends. The reason was always I cannot skip dinner. Sorry, you guys go on without me. As a teenager that was a very lame thing to say, or so I thought. Was not allowed to listen to any music that was not Christian. Period. Bands I liked before this rule that they were previously okay with. Banned. Anything not already on the list of approved bands, such as Jars of Clay, had to be thoroughly vetted. Otherwise they would break the CD in front of you, even if it was borrowed from a friend. Genre didn't matter, as long as they were Christian, which meant bands like Under Oath and MXPX were cool. There were plenty of others, but this is the one that still freaking gets to me over 10 years later. I'd take Jars of Clay over Carmen any day. My mom had that crap on blast and we even went to his concerts. Kids may not talk back to adults and adults are always right. Meaning when an adult tells you to do something you have to do it without question. When an adult FE says something you know is a myth you have to act like you didn't hear it or it's true because otherwise you get massive crap on like yeah, that may be right. But we are adults and a little brat like you won't talk back to an adult. Little brats have to shut up. Or when adults came to dinner you had to sit on the table and eat with them but had to be silent all the time. Everyone was talking but when you tried to get a conversation like everyone else you get reprimanded that you're just a brat and have to shut up when adults are talking. I was allowed to take part in conversation when I was asked a question. Like blah blah blah. 457 kTHNX is really good in school, right? 457 kTHNX. Yes, that's true. What grades do you have? Isn't BZ's best in class? Blah 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 blah. I had to be silent again for when they continued and they talked long. The thing is I wasn't really allowed to answer the question. That was just an euphemism for an order. I had to. It was more like your military sergeant from 1960 asking you something. That also wasn't a conversation. It wasn't enjoyable. Still haunts me as an adult. I never was that good at making friends in elementary school and after elementary school when you needed social skills to have friends and not just a game or a football. I lost my old friends and never got new ones. Kids may not talk back to adults and adults are always right. Meaning when an adult tells you to do something you have to do it without question. Sounds like a great way to get physically shamed. My mum wouldn't let me use the dishwasher well into my teens in case I slipped, fell on the open dishwasher and stabbed myself on knives. She also didn't like me getting things for myself. If I asked her where the chopping board was she'd not tell me. I'd say just tell me and I can get it, but no. I had to wait for her to stop whatever she was doing to get it for me. It drove me nuts because if I kept asking to get it myself she'd shout that I was being demanding. How is wanting to not bother you and be independent in the simplest sense demanding? Just face the knives sharp side down. It wasn't any single rule that was weird. I had a very dysfunctional family. When my dad remarried, everyone thought our new stepmom was this voice of reason. While she's an attorney and she went to Stanford and she believes in rules and structure. My mom and my dad didn't really have rules. So when other relatives saw my stepmom come into the picture they thought, wow, those kids could use some rules. What they didn't know is that she is just as batshit insane as every other adult in the family. She just kept her insanity behind closed doors. Rules were mostly normal looking things, like keeping the house in order, stuff like that. What made it odd is that as a kid, I ended up not being allowed to do anything. I could not go outside. I could not see a friend. I could not go to things like the county fair etc like everyone else, because I had to clean. Even if I had done all my chores for the day, even if I had completed every single thing on my list for that day, if I wanted to do something out of the house, all of a sudden, at 7 PM I need to power wash the driveway, or clean the garage, whatever. My stepmom was, and still is, an alcoholic and a very abusive person. She doesn't usually cross over into physical abuse, but she has. And as a kid, I complained about her a lot and people would say no. She did more for you than your own mother. You should be worshipping the ground that she walks on. People used to think that I hated her because I was a teenager and teens hate rules. Thankfully, with the advent of smartphones and cameras being so easily accessible, I now have videos of her drunken, abusive antics in case anyone wants to argue with me ever again. The ironic part is, she lives in the most disgusting home. Whenever I have to come back to her house for whatever reason, I see mess everywhere. I've taken pictures of the dishes everywhere, pots and pans with food still in them, papers, magazines and newspapers everywhere. She has this gargantuan kitchen that most people dream of having, with a massive amount of counter space, but it's completely covered in food stuff and garbage. So if I go there for a bit, and then leave, I usually get a text from her about how I created this huge mess in the kitchen. Even my dad will tell her, I was only there for 3 minutes to pick something up. I haven't lived there in over 6 years and I still get blamed for her mess. At first I thought this was a joke post and you were just recounting the plot of Cinderella. But then I remembered that real life step-parents can be that awful and abusive. I'm sorry you had to live like that. I hope you're in a better situation now and don't have to see that awful woman very often anymore. My father told me that if I went to a friend's house and my friend's parents offered me anything to eat, I was supposed to refuse. I took this rule very seriously. I remember once a friend's mother offered me a slice of cantaloupe, and when I refused, she tried really hard to coax me to eat it. It got embarrassing. My father grew up in poverty on a farm in the South, and he lived through the Depression. He always had enough to eat, but there were some kids in the neighborhood who didn't. These kids were always hungry, and would try to scrounge food from neighbors. Neighbors would feed them, but they hated having to do it, and they blamed the kids' parents. So the parents of the hungry kids had a bad reputation. The neighbors assumed they were, and maybe they actually were, alcoholics, or just generally lazy good-for-nothings. So my father's fear was, if I accepted any food from anybody, or if I appeared to be hungry at all, people would think I wasn't getting enough food at home, and therefore my father was a bad provider. My father, by the way, had lots of paranoid ideas. My devout Catholic mum never let me, and still doesn't let me watch the Big Bang Theory TV show because she thinks it's all about the actual Big Bang Theory. But the Catholic Church accepts the Big Bang model, and it was even proposed by a priest, Georges Lemaitre. My Macca's potato chips intake was limited to the number of my age. When I was 4 years old, I was only allowed to eat 4 chips every time we went to Macca's. When I was 5, that meant I could eat 5 chips, and so on. This continued until I was around 12. For the confused Americans, Macca's equals McDonald's. Potato chips equals French fries. I was doing some online courses while I was in high school. We had terrible internet, and no internet access anywhere but the family computer, so I convinced my mom to let me go out and get a Wi-Fi router. She allowed it after some time, but anytime I wasn't actively doing my online courses, the router had to be shut off. She said she didn't want the house filling up with the Wi-Fi. I twitch. My dad would ground us if the toilet paper was put on incorrectly. He wants it to go under. Now that I'm married and in my own house, it always goes over. Over is the only way. If any family member or any person in general asked me a question about my mom, I was only allowed to answer with "That's a big people question. You should ask her." That's weird. I had to wait until I was 13 to shave my legs. I think I should mention my legs looked like something from caveman days. It was so embarrassing to dress out in PE. Oh my goodness, this is my story too. I was the last girl in school to shave my legs, and it took a showdown with mom to do so. And it followed because in gym a girl beside me looked down on my hairy appendages and sneered. I went home and declared independence. It became a more scary than needed to be rite of passage. I salute you, sister. I cannot join my 1 year older brother in playing video game outside the house. He is 10 and I'm 9. Then when I turn 10, I still can't. Like, hey mom, I can't beat my brother's age. Outside the house equals internet cafe. That's called favoritism. No drumming on the plates with my spoon and fork while waiting for the food to get ready. My dad said it summoned demons. My 6-year-old self was terrified. Turns out my dad was just an irritable person. Grew up to be like him. Haha. It is pretty annoying. When we moved to Utah, they told me that you had to be over 18 to drink coffee because Mormons were really strict about what minors put in their bodies. I loved coffee and they hated sharing. My mother has always had a white couch. Big, fluffy, inviting sectional type. No one can sit on this couch or even breathe near it. God forbid I forget to mention this to company coming over. I have often wondered why the frick it's even there. Maybe it's for when the Pope comes to visit. We had so many. For example, if we have the coughs, we weren't allowed to go inside the house unless all the phlegm is out of our system, supposedly. Also, if I'll lick my lips in public, without covering it with my hands, it means I'm initiating a kiss from someone. Also, no playing with our toys unless we drink about half a gallon of water. We had to take naps on Sunday, every Sunday. Now that I'm older, I realize that was the only chance my parents had to bang. This is a great rule. For the longest time, my mother made sure I couldn't watch any movies with anything remotely private or scary. For example, if there was any kind of kissing, cuddling or foreplay in a movie, she'd come charging in, demand I look away, and basically taught me to shun all things adult. Another time, she freaked out when my friend's dad said we were watching Tremors, which was PG-13, and we were 12. If anything, my friend and I felt like total badasses going to see 14A movies at age 12. But most of all, for years, she was very adamant that I could never see The Hills Have Eyes. She eventually relented on some other horror movies, even watched Alien with me, but that was the one I could never see. She straight up told me I wouldn't know that it was just a movie, and I'd end up with long-term damage. Eventually, I watched it through the power of the internet, and you know what? I survived, and I thought it was great, if you like horror. And the look of defeat when I told her I had seen the movie was hilarious. Eventually, she gave up. We were not allowed to walk through our dining room. Nothing made my mom angrier than having footprints through her OCD vacuum lines in the carpet. It was easier to cut through dining room from the hallway to get to kitchen. Sometimes after mom was asleep, my brothers and I would sneak through. The older we got, she seemed to get crazier about it. I remember all three of us being grounded for a week for one of us walking through, since she couldn't tell who was the guilty one. It's so strange because other than this rule, and not being allowed to sit on our beds, she was lenient otherwise. No sleepovers or friend visits unless it was school holidays. That was a crap time. I also wasn't allowed to go to school events if they occurred on a school night. That one was bizarre to me. Thank God my childhood is over. If we were naughty, we had to stare down the toilet. Worked a treat. Humiliating, non-physical, and in hindsight pretty freaking funny. My dad is a joker. I currently have a 6-month-old and I think I'll be using this when he's old enough to understand consequences and right from wrong. This is hilarious and doesn't involve inflicting pain. Win-win. No drinking while eating your meal. You are only allowed to drink before or after eating dinner. They thought it was unhealthy for some reason. This is how it was at my daycare. Couldn't drink while having lunch. Apparently it was to keep us from getting full on milk or water instead of the actual food, but I hated it. Sometimes you just need something to wash down that bite of hot dog before moving on to the next, even when you're 5. My mom let me watch South Park, R-rated movies, all sorts of vulgar crap, but I wasn't allowed to watch Maury or Rescue 911 because they profited from exploiting other people's negative circumstances. This makes perfect sense. Entertaining yourself by watching irreal people or animals suffer is classless and low at best, exception being some shows where people or animals are being saved from bad situations, but it also depends on the way the story is portrayed. Nothing wrong with watching vulgar fiction. I wasn't allowed to sit on my bed. I would get into trouble if my friends sat on my bed and crumpled his sheets. They had to stay looking crisp and ironed, which is near impossible. I thought my mom was the only one with that ridiculous rule. My friends thought I was crazy if they sat down on my bed because I started spazzing out. Now that I'm a mom, in 20 years I have never even forced my daughter to make her bed. It would only get made when I washed sheets weekly. My father didn't allow me to cut my hair short nor dye until I was 18. I wasn't allowed to shave till I was 14. I wasn't allowed to wear makeup or paint my nails until I was 15. To this day I am not allowed to sleep over anyone else's home. This ranges from, my parents should relax a little, to I live in a very unhealthy situation. If you are 19, then probably the former. If you are 42, then I'm afraid the latter. My mom would scold me if I ever said K or if I said like in any way that wasn't its original intended use. Basically if I sounded like a 14-year-old. Not allowed to go outside barefoot, ever. Not even to stand on the front porch, check to see how the weather was, get the mail, anything. I had to have shoes on when I went outside, even if it was just slippers or flip-flops. I'm fine with barefoot, but don't let me catch you outside with just socks. If you've taken off your shoes and need to go out, you either take off the socks or put your shoes back on. My reasoning is that you'll wear holes in your socks faster on the concrete. My mom was like that and I didn't understand until I got older. They made my brother and me switch bunk beds at the beginning of every month, even though I liked the bottom and he preferred the top. It's nice when one brother is naturally a top and the other a bottom. I don't know why your parents felt the need to screw with that. Mexican Americans follow crazy superstitions that somehow become rules. The strangest one that I still follow is not getting a haircut after a meal. I have no clue why it's bad, but I still don't do it. I was told that my friends could not sleep over because they may murder me and my family. My parents have always come up with weird excuses to avoid having an honest conversation. When I was 14, my mum banned me from taking selfies. Said they were unnecessary and self-absorbed. This was in 2009 and I hated her for it. All my friends were posting cute camera in the bathroom mirror pictures and I couldn't. Now I am grateful because those pictures are cringy AF. My mom also told me to never kiss a girl when the Katy Perry song I Kissed a Girl came out, so that'll forever be in my head. My mom loves that song and she's mildly homophobic, which makes no sense to me. My parents had a perfect house and yard. I mean perfect. Everyone in the family spent hours to create this perfection. We had a lot of pine trees too. Huge, mature, 40-year-old pine trees. About 15 of them. However, pine cones were not allowed. There was to be no pine cones under the pine trees. It was one of my jobs to make sure that I scooted under these trees and picked up all the pine cones about every weekend in the spring, summer, and fall. It was usually done when we mowed the lawn and did the trimming. I specifically bought a house with no pine trees because it gives me flashbacks. My dad told me that anytime he asked me what were the colors of the walls in any given room, I was to answer black, regardless of the actual color. I soon realized I was young and too stupid to understand at first that this was his way of showing other people how much control he had over me. I can understand a father trying to keep control of his son, but he'd ask me in front of friends and family and it was too embarrassing to say it in front of them. So I'd say whatever color they actually were and just deal with his fits after my friends were gone. For months and months we'd go through this routine until finally I think he realized it was driving me nuts and gave up. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.